Hello, it's Amy. So I guess enough of you liked the first half of my record collection video. So I may as well sit here and finish it. I think we had just looked at my loaded the best of Blake Shelton, and I had mentioned I had some Taylor Swift here. And you'll see the Taylor Swift goes from here all the way down to here. I have almost all her albums. I'm actually missing two of them, I think. And there's a bit of a story to that, I guess. So, I've got to move that out of the way again. I, of course, have her debut album here, waiting for the re-record. I'm actually more excited for the re-record of her first album than I am for the re-record of Reputation, which is, I guess, the opposite of most Swifties these days. But I've been listening to Taylor Swift since the singles for this album hit Canadian radio back in sometime in late 2007. And I would have gone and purchased my CD copy of this. Actually, the only CD that I currently still own. I kept my first CD. I should pull it out here. I think I've got it tucked in here. But yeah, see, there's my CD. The CD version purchased from a Canadian Walmart back when I was 14. It had been out a couple of years at that point. But I've got the CD, I've got the vinyl, but they are not the same, because this is the original release, and this is a later release which only has the radio version of Picture to Burn. Whereas this one has the OG version of Picture to Burn. And I think when she does the re-record, we're probably going to get maybe not the radio edit per se, but as with her Speak Now re-record, we might see a lyric change just because what is acceptable in terms of language has changed. Because there's a line in this one where she's talking about how she's going to tell her friends that the ex who broke up with her is gay. Whereas the radio version, you couldn't say gay on the radio back in 2006, 2007, when that single hit radio. And so the lyric is changed to, and by the way, instead of, you're gay. Now, I don't think she particularly meant anything by it. I certainly don't think it was meant to be a slur. It was just some of the language people used way back in the day, 18, 19 years ago now. Almost 19 years ago now, when her debut album came out. And I always took it as, her saying, well, the only reason he broke up with me is because he's not into women, he's into guys. But I think it's not considered acceptable to use that lyric anymore, and I think even on streaming services that version of the song just isn't there. The only way you're going to hear that original version is if someone's got the CD or an old MP3 download or a bootleg version on the internet. But then I have the re-record of her Fearless album, and I think she re-recorded this one back in 2021. So it's been quite a while. But to me, this whole album, this is high school. I was 14 when this album came out. And so I thought it was so fun to be able to sing the song 15, when I turned 15 on my birthday, and was a Love Story fan, always a big fan of The Best Day and Change. And I used to have the CD of this, but I got rid of it at some point because the only thing I held on to when I no longer had a CD player was that Taylor Swift. And then we have the re-recording of her third album, Speak Now. I also remember when this one came out, once again, another high school album for me. I think I was, this would have been 2010, so I would have been 15, I think, when this one came out. Yeah, I think I would have been 15, but the re-record, absolutely wonderful. And of course, one of my favorites on here is Long Live. Timeless is one of her vault tracks. When she does these re-records, she'll pull songs from what she calls the vault, basically songs that were written and maybe even recorded back when the album first came out that didn't make the cut, didn't make the album. But she goes ahead and she records them now and adds them to the re-records of the albums, which she owns in there entirely. Back to December, of course, love that. Dear John, Speak Now. Lots of good stuff on here. And then I have her re-record of Red. And I really like the re-record of Red. But this is where my journey as an OG Swiftie fell off for a bit. So when I was a teenager, I was really into country music. And I found Taylor Swift because she was a country artist. I still remember her winning Entertainer of the Year on the CMA Awards way back, becoming the youngest person in history to win Entertainer of the Year. And I think she also became the youngest person to write and record a number one country song. But when Red came out, she was shifting away from the country into the pop music realm. And I just remember hearing We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, and then watching the music video for it on YouTube and just being absolutely baffled. At that age, I really just didn't get it, because this would have been 2012, so I would have been 17 or 18 when this came out. And it kind of turned me off Taylor Swift for a bit. And it was all because of that debut single, where I decided that I didn't want to spend my money buying, the CD, the album, for something that I didn't like. And because I think it was We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together and I Knew You Were Trouble. And both of those songs didn't do much for me. Though they don't do much for me till this day. But because of those two singles, which were geared towards pop radio, and I didn't listen to pop radio, I decided not to buy the album, and I missed out on all the deep tracks, on all the good stuff. And so that's why in this collection here, I didn't buy Red back in the day. I didn't buy 1989 back in the day. I didn't buy Reputation. And I didn't buy Lover. I was sort of not a Swiftie for a period of 4 albums. But of course, as you can see, I have the re-records here. And so during the pandemic, when Folklore and Evermore came out in 2020, that's when I kind of rediscovered her music. Of course, I'd loved her first 3 albums for a long time. They were like my teenage years to me. But I went back and I listened to Red and I was like, wait a minute, I missed out. If I hadn't, been turned off by those radio singles, and I guess if music were a little bit different, because back when Red came out for the first time, I didn't have internet at home. I wasn't subscribed to the streaming services that didn't exist. For me, it was, turn on the radio or buy a CD. And it took me a few years to get back to Taylor Swift. And of course, I don't have any of apart from the Taylor Swift self-titled debut that I purchased after the fact. When the original Fearless came out and the original Speak Now came out and the original Red came out, you couldn't buy them on vinyl because vinyls hadn't made their resurgence yet. You could buy them on CD, or you could purchase the songs to stream on your computer, or, when the first ones came out, on your iPod or MP3, and of course later on your phone. But next up is the 1989 re-record. And I like a lot of the songs on here. It's not my favorite. People refer to it as the pop Bible. And as I said, not always a huge pop fan. If I had to, I like all her albums, but if I had to rank them, you know, for me, it's kind of Folklore is my number one. I'm thinking I'd probably put the Tortured Poets Department in number 2. And then I'd be putting her debut album in the number 3 spot. And then maybe I come back for, you know, Evermore in number 4. And put Speak Now in number 5. And Midnight's in number 6. And then maybe Red and 1989. And I won't get too far into that. But I think you get the picture. Because then I actually have 2 of, I think, 4 or 5 different editions of the Folklore album that were released that summer of 2020. And I feel like if you weren't there, you'll never really get it. Because this was a surprise album. We found out, like, I think, like the day before it dropped, or like the day of, there was an announcement, and I had been listening to a little bit of Taylor Swift from the Lover album at that point. And there wasn't much to do, and we found out this album was dropping, me and my friends, and so we all individually listened to it, and it was quite an experience, you know, when that clock hits midnight, to hear this music that really doesn't sound like anything else she had recorded before. And it was very, I guess I would say, therapeutic and cathartic in that time with the kinds of songs that are on that album. So I've got two different editions of that, and I go back to this one, you know, time and time again. And then, of course, there is Folklore's sister album that came out in the fall of that year, Evermore, which has a very similar sound. I would say Evermore feels like winter, whereas Folklore feels like summer in terms of the music. And I think Champagne Problems might be the best song off of Evermore. But she's got a little bit of everything on there, and Marjorie is absolutely beautiful. That's a song she wrote about her grandmother, who was a opera singer. But moving on, I then have 2 different editions of the 2022 Midnight's album. I think this is the one that I prefer. And there were 4 different ones, and if you lined them all up, there was a stand where you could have made, you know, a clock. I've only got 2 of them, and I wasn't planning to collect them and make the clock. But, and of course, they're all different colors. I won't open it up because I'm doing this one-handed. But in terms of, you know, vinyl production, the ones shipped out of the Canadian shop, really, really super high quality. This one from the Canadian shop, I think may have been pressed either in the Czech Republic, maybe, or France. But the ones out of the States somehow seem of lower quality. Because there was a period of time when I was able to purchase things from the Canadian Taylor Swift store or from the US Taylor Swift store and have them shipped here. Now they won't ship most things up to Canada. It's been several years. But now, you know, out of preference, when an album comes out, I go to the Canadian Taylor Swift store because I know they're going to be shipping them from a different location than the ones that the American market is getting. And then we have her most recent album. This is the Tortured Poets Department. And so this one here is the anthology. So it was a double album, but the anthology vinyl wasn't released until just a couple months ago, actually. I think it came out on America's Black Friday. But it's the vinyl with both of the albums because it was a double album. But initially, there were 4 variants of just the first part of the album released. And I was incredibly enthusiastic and purchased all the variants. And the thinking there was because each of these variants have a different bonus track. And at that point, we weren't sure if we were going to get the anthology in its full version ever. So this one, I think that's the Black Dog and the Albatross and the manuscript. And so there's the standard, and then there's the ones with the bonus tracks. And then, of course, the anthology has all the songs. And I know there's some people who think, it's overinflated, it all sounds the same, but I think it's really an album for Taylor Swift fans. Nothing is really radio friendly. There was the single Fortnight that was, pushed to radio, and I would say that's probably the most radio friendly song on the album, that one with Post Malone. But for the most part, it's an album for people who want to feel everything, wallow in those feelings, and enjoy her fine writing style. So that's the Taylor Swift. We'll just pause this. Okay, and now for something a little bit different. Oops. Here is another Hank Snow, the Southern Cannonball. This has a lot of his, I guess I would say, train and travel music on it. I'm moving on, Tangled Mind, Paving the Highway with Tears, the Southern Cannonball, Let Me Go Lover, the Boogie Woogie Flying Cloud. And then I've got some Shania Twain here. This is her Now album. I think this was 2017. A friend and I saw her in concert here in Ottawa not long after this one was released. I was back in grad school when this came out, but always a Shania Twain fan growing up. I would say it would be almost impossible to grow up in the late 90s and early 2000s in Canada and not be a Shania Twain fan. Then I've got an Ernest Tubb record here. Ernest Tubb and his Texas Troubadours. Thanks a lot. This is something that had showed up in my YouTube recommendations. And so last year sometime I was in a used media shop back in Kitchener-Waterloo visiting family. And I saw this one for 99 cents. The Beat Goes On. And I was like, oh, thanks a lot. I like that one. And so I picked it up. And the whole album's pretty good. And next to that, I have my Morgan Wallen, the Dangerous, the double album. I was obsessed with this one back when it first came out. I think that was, 2021? Or I think most of the singles were hitting radio in 2020. And then the album itself came out in early 2021. And there's at least one on here that's a co-write with Eric Church. And of course, some of my favorites, Hardy and Ernest, their fingerprints are all over this album. And I saw him in concert in Montreal a couple years ago. Really great concert, and probably the best opening acts I've ever seen, because it was Bailey Zimmerman, who I also really love, and Ernest, who opened up for him. And then we've got this country compilation here, Put the Hammer Down. It's got Merle Haggard, C.W. McCall, and Cletus Maggard, and Red Sylvain and Red Simpson. Of course, Convoy, White Line Fever, Moving On, The White Knight, Phantom 309, and a few others. This is one of the early ones from my collection. I bought this about the same time that I bought my George Jones Wine-Colored Roses. Okay, now we've moved ourselves over to the bookshelf where it's kind of overflowed. And we have another one of the early records in my collection. This is Lynn Anderson's Rose Garden. I've always liked Rose Garden and Snowbird as well. And she did a recording of a couple of Chris Christopherson songs, including Sunday Morning Coming Down and It's Only Make Believe. I think that might have been Kristofferson too. I could be misremembering, but every song on this album is great, and look at that hair. Then I've got my Eric Church here. So I've got the Eric Church Caught in the Act. I originally owned this one on CD when it came out. This is a live album of one of his concerts. But I picked up the vinyl version a couple years back because I still really am an Eric Church fan. And I would love to see him in concert someday. Way back in 2021, a friend and I actually had tickets to see him here in Ottawa, but the show got postponed due to COVID, and then they scheduled it for the 1st of July, and I kind of held on to my ticket, not really knowing whether I was going to be in or out of the country. And then they ended up moving the show again because, surprise, surprise, they realized they didn't have the police they needed to direct traffic at the stadium on July 1st, because that's obviously Canada Day, and someone didn't think about that when they scheduled the concert. But they moved the concert to a couple of days later, and I ended up taking that opportunity to get a refund on my ticket, which was a disappointment. And maybe he'll be back again someday. A similar thing happened. I was supposed to see Miranda Lambert, I think in 2020 or 2021. A different friend and I had tickets, and that show was just straight up canceled. Here is Eric Church's Mr. Misunderstood album. This is one that I really loved back when I was in undergrad, and I remember, I think it was the CMA Awards, where he surprise dropped his album. Came out, and I think he sang Mr. Misunderstood, which sounded a bit different than anything else he'd ever recorded. And then if you were, I think, a member of his fan club, you were able to order this album, right away that day. That was an era when it wasn't normal to, surprise announce an album like that. Now, of course, in the era of Taylor Swift, it's like, yeah, anything can happen. I've got a few more Eric Church down here, but they seem to be out of order, so maybe I'll fix that here. But here is, I'm just going to take this plastic off, I think. That was the plastic saran on my Noah Kahan Cape Elizabeth that was ripped and coming off. I think I'd left it on purpose to protect it, but it was coming off on its own, so I just took it off. But there's a Noah Kahan, and next to that is Riley Green's Ain't My Last Rodeo. Riley Green is someone that I've just gotten into in the last year or so, but I'm really enjoying his music. And so I've got Ain't My Last Rodeo and his most recent one, Don't Mind If I Do. That duet with Ella Langley, Don't Mind If I Do, is one of my favorite songs of last year, actually. And great album, great voice, great sense of style, great mustache. Next to that, I've got another Morgan Wallen here. This is his earliest and first album, If I Know Me. Obviously a different look than his Dangerous album era, but still some good songs on there. Then we've got another Eric Church. This is his Desperate Man album. I remember when he was dropping music videos for this one on YouTube. That was something else. I can't say it's my favorite of his, but Monsters is probably my favorite song off of that album. And then I've got some Zach Bryan. I was obsessed with this album when it came out. I think it was it just last year? Or maybe it was the year before. East Side of Sorrow. That one was good, really spoke to me. And of course the duet with Casey Musgraves, I Remember Everything. His most recent one, The Great American Bar Scene. I had seen him in concert actually a year ago yesterday, or a year ago today. Actually, I think it was a year ago today I saw him in Toronto. And he sang his song, Great American Bar Scene, but because he was in Canada, he changed the lyrics to the Great Canadian Bar Scene. And then his team later released, recordings of the concerts for those of us who had been there. And I watched it and I was disappointed because they had cut out the Great Canadian Bar Scene. But it's a solid album as well. And this one I actually haven't opened up the plastic yet because it was a Christmas gift and I'm still not sure how I feel about the guy. There were some allegations about how he treated his last girlfriend, and I'm sort of on the fence. I don't want to get rid of his stuff yet, but I'm not really, super into listening to it right now. But moving on, here's Billie Eilish's album, Happier Than Ever. Not a huge Billie Eilish fan, but this album in particular I really liked, and so I ended up getting it for my collection here. Then we've got some more Eric Church. So this might look confusing, but this is the And album because it was part of a three-part album that came out a couple years ago. It was called Heart and Soul. And the deal was that Heart and Soul were available for anyone to buy, but the And album in the middle was only available to people who were members of his fan club. And it's a really good album. And I'm trying to remember what's on each of these. Stick That in Your Country Song, that was a radio single. Russian Roulette, always liked that one. Trying to remember which of these had Heart on Fire. Through My Ray-Bans, I like that one. Leonard Skinner Jones, yeah. Rock and Roll Found Me. Hell of a View, I like Hell of a View. But yeah, it's been a while since I've regularly listened to the Eric Church, and so I lose track of what's on what record here. There's another Shania Twain here, The Woman in Me. One of the ones that I enjoyed growing up. You Win My Love, always a big fan of that one. I've seen Shania Twain in concert twice. Once at the Canadian Tire Centre back in 2017, and once back in 2023 at Ottawa Blues Fest, which was an outdoor music festival. And both times she was really, really good. At the last concert, she told the story about how she'd written Whose Bed Have Your Boots Been Under? I think it was that song. But anyone from this area knows that she's a Canadian girl at heart, and she grew up here in Ontario and went down south and had a country music career. Then I've got a Marty Robbins here, Gunfighter Ballads and Trail Songs, and one little one here, Noah Kahan's Northern Attitude. Came with a poster, and this is the Canadian exclusive Ruby vinyl, meaning that it is red. But it's just got the two songs on it, or rather the one song in two versions, Northern Attitude and Northern Attitude with Hozier. And this is one of those made in the Czech Republic, the Canadian exclusive, and it is kind of fun to get a Canadian exclusive from an American artist. And of course, up north here, Northern Attitude was the perfect pick. But anyway, that's my record collection here. Sort of a summary of my favorite genres of music and the evolution of what I've listened to over the years.